Hi, I'm Sam, Flying Kite, and welcome to the horror show. This is deep dive number 2. I'm not really sure how else to describe it. That's what it is. Anyway, we're doing Dracula Untold. So, I don't have a marker yet, unfortunately. And the one that I had, I think I threw out. So, back at it, the piece of paper. The piece of paper. So, this is some things I'm going to go back over. It came out in 2014, it's PG-13, it's an hour and a half, directed by Gary Shore, written by Matt Sazaman and Burke Sharpless, composed by Raymond Djawadi, who did Iron Man and Pacific Rim. Luke Evans, Sarah Gadon, Dominic Cooper, Art Parkinson, Charles Dance are all in the movie. Luke plays Vlad, Sarah plays Mirena, Dominic plays Mehmed, the Sultan, Mehmed. Art plays Ingeras, and Charles Dance plays Master Vampire. It's produced and distributed by Universal Pictures. The budget was about 70 to 100 million, and the box office was nearly doubled that, or a little less than tripled it, depending on what it was closer to. The kill count is a lot of people, and a good way of putting it is a good telling of how Vlad becomes the Count. Because Dracula, the character, that we all know and love, he was not, directly based off of Vlad the Impaler. It's just more so a... Bram Stoker really liked the name. And then there just so happened to be this person named Vlad the Impaler who, Dracula was, one of his nicknames. And it's really funny how they both fit. Although, if I were to go back and look, or if someone watched this video and they're like, actually, Bram Stoker actually based it off of him completely, and blah, 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 that's like, oh, well, got me there, right? But I suppose I'm just not really familiar with it, so I could be completely wrong, but that's my understanding of it. I really like this movie. So much so that, this is definitely a top 10 comfort food movie for me. Or at least it's definitely up there, If I'm tired, or I want to fall asleep to a movie, or I had a real bad day, I just want to watch a fun movie, or whatever. This is one of those movies. But one thing, though, watching it this past time that made me, kind of view it a bit differently, is the whole story, thinking about the story, big picture, what I would go and call the Christian explanation, right? I completely forgot to turn that off. I'm not editing that out. I will take all the time. What was I saying? Oh, yeah, I started watching this movie kind of like how a lot of people watch Star Wars Revenge of the Sith, in the sense of hopefully this time ends differently. So, if you're watching Star Wars, then you understand that there's a character that you don't want to turn to the dark side. I don't know. People, someone watching this might never have seen Star Wars, so I don't want to go and spoil. But it's the idea that, there's this character, and he's going to end up turning to the dark side, because either you've seen the movie a million times, or you've seen the other movies that are, timeline-wise afterward. But you're still hoping that, hey, this time he won't fall to the dark side, kind of thing. It's kind of like me in this movie, except it's more of him not becoming a vampire at the end, or staying a vampire at the end. But let me get to that, right? My Christian explanation, which I guess isn't really an explanation, it's more of a exclamation, because it's not really an answer to the problem, but it's more of just my take or whatever. Vlad tried to find his own way rather than having faith in God, and it cost him damnation. So, this movie is kind of based off of the real-life character You know, same time period, basically the same character. The only real difference is Vlad the Impaler is not a vampire. He was just very brutal with how he killed people. But in the movie, storyline-wise, Vlad grows up as a Turk, you know, with the Ottoman Empire. And his closest, you know, the closest thing to religion that he would have growing up is Islam. Now, he's not a Turkish person. He's a Romanian person. But, you know, as a boy, he was taken away. And he had he was raised by them, basically. So, you know, growing up, he knows Islam. And as a Turkish soldier, you know, he kills, like, thousands of innocent people, which, funny enough, would include Christian crusaders, because at the very beginning, when there's kind of like this narrator, with the boy's narrating, and he's, like, you know, talking about, you know, very briefly, you know, his father, right? You see images of, like, his father killing people, but you see that he's killing crusaders. And then later on, when Vlad is making the deal with the devil, the devil's like, oh, it's not really the devil, but, he killed thousands of people, innocent people. So I just thought that was like a, you know, see? Anyway, back to the main point. When he returns home, he becomes home with, you know, Christianity again, right? Because there's, like, the Orthodox Church there. I don't think it's Catholicism. It could be. It's either or, I think, at that point, because this is, like, the mid-1400s, and it's probably more likely Orthodox. But anyway, when the Turks come to take the 1,000 boys and his son, he has two choices to make. He can choose to keep his son. Oh, my bad. Wait. The choice is to, you know, if he keeps his son, the two choices would be to have faith and trust in God, you know, fighting or running, whether, you know, they're fighting and having faith in God, or they're running away, having faith in God that they will survive, or turning to the evil that he found in the mountain, which is the master vampire, Charles Dance's character. He chooses to turn to the evil. In his word, you know, sometimes the world doesn't need a hero, sometimes it needs a monster. And I think that's a really fascinating line, because it's like, you don't want to use the evil in this world to do good, because when you do the evil, you become that evil. And it's just like, what's the point? You might as well have not even won at all, kind of thing. Unless, there's like some unless in there. But it's that idea that, like, if you're looking into the darkness, it's looking back at you. That, you know, when you're sinning, you know, you're a part of that. So if you're using sin to do stuff, or evil, for example, you know, to, you know, do good, sure, it could be good, but it's not what was intended to happen. Like, you know, watching the movie, he tries to find his own way. Well, let me continue. There's a lot of choices he ends up having to make in this movie, but ultimately, he has 3 days of being a vampire, and then the vampirism is taken away from him, unless he drinks blood. And on the 3rd day, his kingdom is gone. At that point, the kingdom's gone. His wife is gone. Well, his wife's about to die, and his son is taken. And so then he has 2 choices to make there: to become a vampire, or to, you know, go back and be mortal. But, you know, if he's mortal, then, like, you know, his son's gone, and, you know, his wife's dead, and it's just him, and he would live with all that guilt. And so at that point, it's like, it's a really, like, it's really bad, ultimately, whatever choice he ends up making. But it's not like he becomes a vampire, you know, oh yeah, haha, fun. He becomes a vampire to, you know, save his son from, you know, the Turks, and also to, you know, destroy the Turks too, probably. But, you know, he drinks his wife's blood to stay a vampire. The wife's, you know, brought it up. And he gets some of the people that survived the raid at the end, and basically makes them all vampires as well. And they go and destroy all the Turks, and he defeats Mehmed. And it's, he saves the son, but then all the other vampires are like, hey, he's human, we gotta kill him, it's all of them versus all of us now. And lucky us, our priest friend, I forget his name, Brother Miriam, something like that, or I don't remember what his name was, I'm sorry. The main priest character, he's there, and he's able to, he asks for the sun, to protect the sun. He has, the cross and scare all the vampires away. And when Vlad gives him over, he, uncovers the clouds and the sun's out and destroys all of them, including himself. So it's like, it's very interesting, because if he chose to, have faith in God, then I would think anyway, mostly looking back to the Old Testament stories where there's the kingdom of Israel or the kingdom of Judah, and the armies are outside its gates and they're praying and whatnot, and in the morning they look outside and they're all dead out there, kind of thing. Or just that idea of having faith in God, but it's like he believes in God, but on the second day, he sees some of his people praying, and he's like, prayers, get up, prayers won't defend these walls, kind of thing. He believes that there's a God, because later on he prays to God, but he doesn't have the faith that, it's like, oh, I have faith, that you'll help me, but I don't have the faith that you could help all of us. Like, oh, no way, right? That would be that's the problem. That's ultimately the problem that I'm looking at, or trying to look at. And sure, it's very difficult to out-imagine in a way, to, put yourself in that situation, right? Like, what do you do? It is just you. But, yeah, I thought it was really interesting, because he, ultimately, to sum it all up, instead of turning to God for help, he turns to the devil for help. And the price, ultimately, is that his wife is gone. Howie. I hope that's not blaring. I'm sorry if it is. His wife is gone. His kingdom is gone. He technically is gone, but he gets brought back to life later on, at the very end. And, his son is still alive, so that's good. But, I guess if you tried to make the deal with God, I would argue that your chances would have been a lot more better off, ultimately, is my thought. But that would just be based off the movie. Real life, though, Vlad the Impaler was like a huge hero of Romania who defended off the Turks, specifically the Ottoman Empire. And very brutal guy who, killed a lot of people, and, very brutal. But, I mean, Europe was still Christian, or still, European. It's definitely one of those, characters in history that are very, interesting, in the sense of, what would Europe look like if he wasn't around, kind of thing? What would Europe look like if he didn't do what he did, right? Would it look any different? Would it look the same? Because the Ottoman Empire was at a few points trying to, get into Europe, and that's ultimately the whole reason why the Crusades started in the first place. I don't know about later on, of course, but it got to the point where it's like, yes, gotta defend yourself or you're dead. So, I guess it's interesting how the character in the movie, does that. But, it's funny how, you go on IMDb, there's, a lot more 10 out of 10s than 1 out of 10s. But, the 1 out of 10s are, historically inaccurate, or this problem or that problem or whatever. And it's like, okay, I like this version of Vlad more than I like... Well, actually, I'm not even really sure. It's tough, because this version of Vlad... to save his people, immediately turns to, vampirism, the devil. But, the Vlad in Bram Stoker's Dracula with Gary Oldman, that Vlad, he's out there, fighting the Turks, and his wife ends up, killing herself because, she thinks that her husband's dead. And then when he comes back and finds that out, then he, curses God, and that ultimately is how he becomes a vampire, and that... But, it's just it's really interesting, I suppose, to think about it, because as a Christian, we're supposed to have faith in God, that, however it turns out, he'll be there. Now, if that means, you lose your life, then you lose your life. Or if that means that you have to fight, then you have to fight. Because it's not like, it's like there's the story, not really like a story, a real life story, it's more of like a lesson, I guess, where it's this person and there's a flood and the person's on top of their house and the flood water keeps on rising, and the person's like, if I have faith, God will save me. And there's a boat that comes, but the person's like, oh no, God will save me. There's a plane that comes, oh no, God will save me, blah blah blah. The waters rise all the way to the top, the person drowns and dies. When the person goes to heaven, the person's like, hey, why didn't you save me? And God's like, I sent a boat, I sent a plane, I sent whatever, and you didn't, whatever. So it's like, it's twofold. One, you have to do a lot more than prayer, but in the same time, you have to be aware of it, I guess. And it's just funny how Vlad in the movie turns to the devil, in a sense. And prayer is supposed to be a thing, you're supposed to use. Now, obviously, you're supposed to do a lot more than prayer. But it's just, I don't know, he was so like, oh, prayers won't save you. Like, sure, prayers might not save you physically. Especially if you're not, doing something yourself. Like if someone came into your house and it was 5 people came to your house and they tied up you and your family, you could pray and maybe, their hearts change. But if their hearts don't change, then you're dead. But then in that sense, you would be in heaven, or you would think you'd be in heaven. I'm pretty sure you would be, if you believed in Jesus, of course, in that scenario. But no, it's just a very interesting, thing to think about, because now I'm kind of thinking about it a little more. I probably should have thought about it a lot more. But I feel like how I'm going about it is, the ultimate point of what I'm trying to say is he doesn't have faith in God, or complete faith in God. He has some faith in God, but he more turns to the world to solve his problems. And sure, the problems are solved at the end of the movie, but at the cost of almost everything. So it's like, did you really win, son? Was it really good picking the world over God, right? But as I said, it's you pray to God, but you also have to, do something yourself, because sure, it's he could come and save you and it'd be a supernatural event, or he gives you the strength to fight them. You could either turn to that specific Bible thing I said earlier, whereas the kingdom, and then they were surrounded, and the next morning, they prayed the whole night, but the next morning, they're all dead. The army outside's dead. Or you think of Gideon, and he has 300 troops, and they're going up against a lot more than 300, but how they end up going about the attack, they end up winning. And yeah, it's just the idea that as I already said it multiple times, he has faith in God, but not complete faith in God, and that ultimately, I would say, was his downfall in the movie. But yeah, I mean, I guess that's all for this. Yeah. It definitely makes it interesting, the idea of, using evil to do good. Say for me, for example, I don't know if it would be comparable, or if it's where am I coming from, but the idea of oh, I want to make horror movies and have Christian morals in it to, help lead people to Christ. Is that more of me wanting that, or of, God wanting that? Because I want to make movies. And then I guess I would also like to do that, but I don't want to I don't want to be like one of those people that Jesus is like, oh, I never knew you. And I'm like, but I did all these things. But it's like, I didn't know him. And he didn't know me because I didn't really know him. But, the using the, evil of the world, horror movies are like, oh, so evil and whatnot. But you could see good lessons in horror movies or, Christian messages in horror movies. It's just, am I the right person? Or, it all just ends up, does it fit? Or, all right, going back a little bit to the whole prayer thing. I really want to be a movie director, right? It's like, oh, I could pray. Like, please, God, make me a movie director, but I'm not going to wake up the next morning and, oh, I'm already a movie director. Maybe stuff starts being played in emotion. Maybe I start having more desire and whatnot to, like, write more or whatever. Or things start working out to the point where maybe 10 years from now, I am a movie director. But it's just not, like, an overnight thing, and, like, you have to do something, too. But, anyway. I'm Sam, Flying Kite. This is Deep Dive of Dracula Untold. And, I hope this is more than 25 minutes. I feel like it could be. But if it's not, it's really close. But, anyway. I'll see y'all next week. Goodbye.